What's going on, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are taking a look at Kenny Golladay and his fantasy outlook for 2020. So before we get started, hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like this one, and let's get right into it. So last year, obviously only getting to spend half of the season with his quarterback Matthew Stafford, still put up a really good fantasy year. Plenty of reason to be hyped and excited about heading into his contract season in 2020 as well. Right now, the only wide receiver on contract through 2021 is their rookie Quintez Cephas. Now, I don't think anyone imagines that the Lions won't give an extension to Kenny Golladay at some point, but still fighting for that money, trying to get a deal similar to what Amari Cooper just got. So let's take a look at what he did last year. So finishes the season with 65 receptions, nearly 1,200 receiving yards, but 11 total touchdowns, leading the league in touchdowns amongst wide receivers. Finishes with the 9th most fantasy points at 248 and 15.5 fantasy points per game, putting him at 13th at the position. Now, again, as we mentioned, weeks 1 through 9 playing with Matthew Stafford, and from 10 onward playing with the quarterback play, if you want to call it that, of Jeff Driscoll and David Blau. Did still manage to put up a top 6 week against Chicago, which was pretty impressive considering the circumstances. And honestly, when we review his week-over-week stats, it didn't really change all that much for him, jumping from one quarterback to the next. So I'm not expecting that much of an efficiency increase. I do think it will keep his ceiling a bit higher if Matthew Stafford is able to play the whole year. Obviously, that would make sense. But he did still kind of have that boom-bust mentality that you see with another wide receiver, similar to like Amari Cooper, where just has the ability to completely disappear. Obviously, week 3 against Philadelphia finishes with 3.7 fantasy points, another 3.1. So you have like 5 games. I guess we'll give him a pass in week 17. 4 games where you're really disappointed if you started him, but then also gives you the upside of those top 6 wide receiver weeks. And with the amount of touchdowns that he scores, it gives you a pretty decent baseline. You'd like to see some more receptions. I think that would definitely help, especially in PPR. That would give him a higher floor, and maybe that's a possibility this year, but considering the addition of DeAndre Swift, not really any other changes to this team, doesn't really make up for any narrative that you would want to follow to say that, oh yeah, Kenny Golladay is all of a sudden going to see like a massive uptick in targets and receptions. But as long as he continues to maintain his red zone presence, I think that his fantasy value will continue to tick up. I like Kenny Golladay a lot this year. I'm probably not going to end up with him on any of my teams because there's other receivers that I just like slightly more. He's going around, and his draft price has really gotten up there, and he's being respected this year. And rightfully so, finishing where he did last year. He should be going, in the early to mid part of the 3rd round. And there's plenty of receivers in that tier that I like a lot. So Kenny Golladay, definitely a fine pick heading into 2020. Now, some other things to note just from reviewing the stats. Obviously, we already mentioned, led the league in touchdowns now. Historically, we know that touchdowns can be very hard to predict year over year, so that could actually be seen as a negative for Kenny Golladay, but he's continued to have a high touchdown volume year over year. Same thing with Marvin Jones. The Lions throw a lot of touchdowns every year, especially with Matthew Stafford. Hopefully he stays healthy for a whole 16 games. TJ Hawkinson could come in and spoil this a little bit, but outside of Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, the wide receiver core in Detroit is pretty gross. Danny Amendola, not really that much of a mover or shaker, and then outside of that, really nothing. So there's a reason that this power vacuum gets sucked to Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, especially in the red zone, and also the lack of a really good run game has always helped to suppress the total touchdowns heading in that direction. So DeAndre Swift might also eat into this equation too. So there's definitely reason to give pause to the total touchdowns that Kenny G might get in 2020, but we're still expecting it to be decently high. He also led the league in deep targets last year with 37, and that's part of the reason that where okay with still projecting him in a high touchdown count. He has the ability to break a long touchdown pretty much every single game. Fourth in yards per reception at 18.3, 10.3 yards per target, sixth best, average target distance 15.7. So massive deep target, but a guy that gets enough volume and does it consistently enough that still has been a wide receiver one. His catch rate was actually pretty gross, 56%, so there's actually some room for improvement there. And obviously you're going to have a lower catch rate when your target distance is this much higher, higher leverage, higher quality passes that end up scoring a lot more fantasy points but are harder to come down with. So rather have a lower catch rate and all these other stats higher. But if he's able to just even increase his catch rate just slightly and receives the same target volume, that could be the story that brings him up from wide receiver 9 up to like top 5 wide receiver. If he's able to come down with 65% of his targets, that would be insane. Last year also with Stafford, he was the 9th best fantasy points per game score with Matthew Stafford. So we did see a drop in his points per game on average without Stafford, dropping about down 2 points over the average of the season. So definitely is going to be better off if Matthew Stafford is healthy for the whole year. You don't need me to tell you that, but that should be pretty clear. So where do we have him projected right now? We actually have him going up into the reception count, which I think would be really good for him. Have him getting up to 75 receptions. Have his yards per reception going down slightly, so that would give him, again, right about 1,200 receiving yards. And we still have him getting about 10 touchdowns, so pretty similar to last year. Again, not too much changing with this team. Defense isn't very good. Matthew Stafford should be healthy. They're going to have to air the ball out a lot if they want to keep up and try to win some games this year. Now, DeAndre Swift might change a little bit to the efficiency of this offense, but we're not expecting him to make too big of an impact, at least in the first half of the season. So things should be pretty status quo. This is one of the easier teams to project and imagine how things will finish out. So Kenny Golladay is a solid third-round pick. Start running back, grab Kenny G as your wide receiver one. No one's going to get angry at you for that. If you take a wide receiver with one of your first 2 picks, having him as your wide receiver 2 is just stealing. So really like Kenny Golladay this year. And although, like I said, there's some other receivers going around him that I'd probably end up taking over him because I think their upside is just a little bit higher. Kenny G definitely sees a boost in standard leagues as well due to the lack of the receptions that you want to see from your top tier receiver. But even with that lower reception total, his average yards per target, his ability to score tons of touchdowns definitely keeps him up there and with some of the highest range of outcome. So absolutely love Kenny G this year. What say you guys? Hit me up in the comment section below with any questions, any thoughts, and we'll see you in the next video.